I told Mr. Stimpson last night that I'd sent him and Billy some questions, and I plan on asking none of them. All right, we got limited time with them today, so I'm going to do my best to not talk and just rapid fire ask. But, you know, a lot of people have familiarity with the Stimpson family, so I won't go into a ton of background, but we'll certainly interject, throughout the conversation. But, as I look back on my life, and the Stimpson family has been a major part of it since birth. Mr. Sandy, his family gave my dad a wonderful opportunity because of their friendship, and were a major financial supporter of him and his own real estate endeavors over the years. And I often say one of the greatest testaments that I can give to the man that my dad is that he had the same partners his entire business career. Yeah, the Stimpson, the Miller family, they did every deal my dad did his entire career. And when you talk about families making a generational impact, these two men right here have made a generational impact on my family. What Mr. Sandy did for my dad, which in return did for me, Billy, his partner Ralph, who spoke here last year, cannot think of people who have done more for me in my life to give me the opportunities that I have. And a lot of my 68 that I carry forward is because of people like their family that have poured in to folks like me and given me a chance to move mine ahead. And as I sit here today, one of the things that has most enamored me about y'all's entire family, not just you two, but, goes back to a quote I heard Coach Oates, the Alabama basketball coach, said, you can tell everything you need to know about somebody by how they treat someone who'll never be able to do anything for them. And your family, Sands, who's one of my closest friends as well, y'all have always had this innate ability to, whether you're dealing with kings or paupers, to meet everyone the same. To have that grace, to have that empathy, to be able to connect with anyone. And I'll start with you, Mr. Stimpson. Where did that come from as a child? I mean, obviously that's not an accident because it's not just you. It's everybody that shares your last name.
Well, thank you, Nathan, but I'm not sure we can live up to all those accolades.
I got more coming, so get ready.
Well, just save them, We're just regular folks that I guess we're very fortunate to have good parents and good role models. And so where it came from my perspective, for me, is that I worked for my father and my two uncles, and I saw how they treated people. And so, you can read stuff in a textbook, but what you see people doing is probably the best teacher that you can have. And so I had a mother that was loving, had parents that loved us, and what I recognized is that my dad's success and the company's success was dependent on people. And people from all walks of life. And I'll tell you a real quick story. When you get out of college, how smart you are. I mean, so I'd gotten out of college and I'm working at the sawmill, and probably nobody on that sawmill floor had gotten over a 6th grade education. And we had the roof off the mill. We're putting all this new equipment in, and I'm trying to tell them how to do it. And finally, this elderly black gentleman walked up, and he said, "Sandy, if you'll leave for about 30 minutes, I think we can get this piece of equipment in there." I said, "Okay." So I came back about 40 minutes later. It's set in place. He came and put his arm around me. I realized right then I wasn't as smart, as cool, or whatever as I thought I was, but it comes back to, I think, being humble and understanding that anybody, no matter what their education level is, they can positively impact your life, and you need to try to find out what that is that can help you, because ultimately you can possibly help them.
So for you growing up, would you say your dad was your biggest mentor?
My father and my two uncles, and then there was one coach who Don Kelly.
Yeah.
Those were the most influential people in my life.
Yeah, and then how about as time went on? I mean, surely you've had additional mentors in your additional life stages, but anybody else that just comes to mind outside of family that was really transformational in shaping you?
Well, John Crowell is one, a guy named Gary Palmer, but more kind of from the spiritual side, and as I say, that in my family we have an older sister. She was really the spiritual leader of our family, and she had 3 younger brothers. We were all reprobates, running hard. We were wallowing in the ditch. She prayed us out of there, okay? And then I started meeting people like John and realizing what their faith meant to them. And it put me on a whole new trajectory about it. It really was not about me. It was about, what I could do to help others.
Well, I give Miss Croyle a lot of credit for praying me through some of my bad days in college. Yeah.
We were praying for you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sandy. So, Billy, I know your dad has been a guiding light for you. I know Ralph has been one of your biggest mentors. For you, who else would you say either coming up or, early in your career has really helped shape you as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my parents and Ralph Reynolds, who's here today, have definitely been the most influential mentors that I've had, both personally and professionally. But John Kroll actually had a really big impact on me in high school. And
Is that because you tried to date his daughter? Or?
It might have had something to do with it. And I learned really quickly there were some very strict rules that were going to go involved with that. But, the mentors that you have, you don't necessarily know where they're going to come from and how they're going to impact you. But I've continued to kind of seek people out, throughout my life, and it's been a very important part of it.
So let's talk about the contrast in those two mentors there. Your dad and Mr. Ralph, two of the most honorable people I've ever met. Like, whatever they tell you is their word. They wouldn't screw you over. They wouldn't do you wrong, even if they had to die to honor it. But two different views of the world there in a lot of different areas. So maybe talk for a minute about, how do you take what you learned from your dad in certain areas versus, Ralph, who had his teeth already cut in the Wall Street world, even though he grew up down here. And how do you kind of mesh that into becoming who you are today? Because I can certainly see the balance of both.
Yeah, so when I think about Dad, the term servant leadership is kind of the vision that I have, and have just watched him not only at Guff Lumber Company, but at UMS, Pritchard Prep, and then leading the city of Mobile. He was so willing to build consensus, build teams, and try to put other people in front of him, and really lift everybody up, kind of for the better of the goal that he was pursuing. So Ralph Reynolds hired me 25 years ago to come work for him at Deutsche Bank in New York, and I knew nothing about finance, Wall Street, and got to New York. There were 500 people on the floor that I worked on, and it was an intimidating place. And when Ralph walked on the floor, everybody knew he was there. And I kind of equate him to a battlefield general that is, around his troops. And at first I thought people were just scared or intimidated. And there were times when he would throw a trash can or break a phone or scream at somebody and instill, a little bit of fear in them. But what had happened is in the trading industry, it's so cutthroat, and he had really been in the trenches. He had been in, the positions that we were all in, and he was so good at delegating responsibility and then building up people so that they could have success. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at both my dad and Ralph, they've both empowered and enabled other people to have success, and they'll get out of the way. A lot of times leaders will be micromanagers and have to feel like they have to do everything themselves. And I would say that Ralph and Dad, though their styles and maybe their temperaments are at times a little bit different, they've done a phenomenal job of trying to elevate those around themselves. Yeah,
and your moment that you described there was one that I had later, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in. But it kind of reminds me of when you get to the Marine Corps. No longer matters where you came from, who your daddy was, what you've accomplished. You're just another candidate, And so for you, as somebody who had been successful at every stage of life up to that point, graduating from Vanderbilt, had plenty of opportunities, you show up in the most competitive environment, that there is. This is the best of the best kind of thing, the smartest, the brightest, the driven, the cutthroat. What was kind of that initial aha moment of, oh shit, what have I gotten myself into here? Being back home doesn't sound like the worst thing right now.
I was scared to death. I mean, truly, I I knew nothing. I was surrounded by a bunch of Ivy League educated finance guys. I've never been more intimidated in my life. And I wanted to quit quite a few times. The first 6 months, it was pretty awful. And then finally, and Ralph kept telling me, and the guy that I sat directly next to, who Ralph threatened to fire if I didn't succeed, he said, look, just keep studying, keep learning, be patient, and a light switch will go off. And that did ultimately happen. It took me a little bit longer than most people, but I finally settled in and ultimately figured out how to trade and ended up trading for 10 years. But it was the most uncomfortable and kind of nerve-wracking experience just to leave, I would say, the comfort of that you were describing, that I grew up in.
But definitely had somebody like a Ralph sitting there knowing that you couldn't give up, you couldn't fail him. He stood up for you. You'd be letting your dad down. And that was no matter what I got to do, no matter how many hours I got to put in, no matter how many hits on the head, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, there was the thought of actually quitting or leaving never entered my mind. But, I think we all go through moments where you're frustrated, you're disappointed in yourself. You're uncomfortable in your surroundings, and of course you want to give up. Yeah. But I was never going to walk into Ralph's office and say no thank you or call my dad.
Yeah, natural to doubt your abilities there. And that's something I used to always try to remind myself, whether it was walking on, military, whatever. So many people before me had done it. So if they've done it, surely I'm capable somehow, some way. May not be pretty, may not look like what I want, but there's a way to get to the other side. And I saw you ready to jump in.
I was jump in. So Billy was doing the interviewing process. He had flown up to meet with the interviewing team, and he called me, and I said, how'd it go? Of course, I was thinking he was going to be all pumped. And he said, terrible. I don't belong up here. I can't do this. And I said, what do you mean you can't do it? He said, Daddy, these people that I was talking to, they're doing calculus equations in their head to get to the solution to the problem that they've given me. And he said, I never took calculus. I said, well, I can't help you because I failed it the first time I took it. So I don't know if that was any encouragement to him or not, but he was very intimidated.
Yeah, that sounds like my first day of summer workouts at Alabama, calling Dad and saying, I don't have a prayer. He goes, damn it, I told you that, son. I already lived that. He goes, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm too stubborn to quit. So 4 years later, I'm still there. But, same thing for you, Mr. Stimpson. Getting into politics, I know you'd been around it your entire career, but until you actually jump in that arena, you have no idea what's coming. And look, you were a major underdog. I mean, if I don't recall correctly, there was only one person that bet on you to win, actual money. It happens to be the guy interviewing you. But, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I mean, what was the aha moment of like, A, I'm running, what have I gotten myself into? And then B, after you've won, like, man, this ain't the business world. I'm going to have to adapt.
It's certainly not the business world. It's not something that I thought I would do. And I was on the peripheral of politics. And when I say that, I was helping people raise money, the candidates that I believed in, and then had an opportunity to interact with them. And so I was never intending to run. And, you've heard the story before, Nathan, but I was at an event, and somebody said, when are you running for governor? I'd made a speech at the BCA Chairman's Conference, and I said, I'm not running for anything. And they turned to Jean and said, when's he running for governor? She said, I don't know, but he will be married to his second wife when he does. So when we started having conversations about, how do I get in, am I really supposed to do this? And what I had learned in my life at that point in time is that God speaks to you through circumstances, through people, and through His Word. And people kept asking me to run for office. And finally one day it dawned on me, I said to Jean, Jean, I really don't want to get to heaven. And God said, Sandy, I kept sending you a message. Why didn't you listen? And I'm being very serious when I say that. And so that caused us to start having a lot of conversations. And so as I get closer and closer to the decision, and I just pretty much made up my mind to run. And I was meeting with the children. That Billy happened to be home from school, and we got them all gathered up. It was toward the end of the summer, I think. And so they were all saying, Daddy, if that's what you want to do, support it. Well, we got to the youngest one, who's Nancy. I have boy, girl, Billy, Virginia, Sands, and Nancy. And Nancy looked at me and she said, "Daddy, you have to run." And I said, "No, honey, I really don't have to." And she said, "Oh, yes, you do." And I said, "Why are you saying that?" And she said, "Because you couldn't live with yourself knowing that you could make a difference and you didn't even try." You know, and so the theme that you've heard from the other people here today, you know, there it is. One of my children that I've been telling her stuff like that when she's going out for cheerleader, now she's putting it back on me. But that's true for everybody out there. I don't care where you are at this point in your life. There's an opportunity out there for you to do something, and something's going to prick your heart, hopefully, that'll make you, inspire you to take that leap of faith. And it's a huge leap of faith, Nathan. And, you know, I could go on, and we don't have enough time to talk about it, but the difference in being in the business world and let's say leading your family, leading in the business world, or leading in the political world is the scrutiny that you're under and that your family is under when you're in the political world is something that's, until you're there, you really can't describe it. And so you learn real quickly to guard what you say. And so you also find out that in that world, in that arena, once you get elected, so many people are risk averse. And in the business world, you pretty much make decisions, you take risk, and so. But if you're working for the city, you're working for the county, the people that are entrenched there, you know, they're concerned about taking that risk. So you've got to persuade them to do different. But I could go on with stories about how we did things to, let's say, persuade them, coach them into doing it. And I think that's part of why having the business background that I had and the team that we had, some of them had business background, we were able to help transform the city of Mobile. Can I take tell a real quick story, but it's like the mindset. I was so fortunate to appoint a police chief named Jim Barber. If Jim was in the military, he'd be a general. And he thought different than everybody else. And so we were having a lot of problems with drugs and all and crime. And he said, "Sandy, we're going to quit doing things the way we've been doing it. We're going to do it completely different. We're going to go into the communities and we're going to find the bad guys." They're probably only 10% of the people in any city are really the bad guys, okay? You extract them and 90% of the crime stops. I mean, it's just, my numbers may be a little bit off. So he says, "I tell you what, let's do. We're going to go in the highest crime area. We're going to go door to door knocking on these doors, and we're going to let people know that we care about them." Well, so we go to the corner of State Street and State and Kennedy. And he says, right down there, that's an open-air drug house. It's been operating for 30 years. And I said, "Jim, how in the world can it have been an open-air drug house operating in any city for 30 years? That's ridiculous." And he said, "Well, we're going to take it out." And he told me how he was going to do it. Well, we implemented all these ideas he had. And about probably 2 months later, we had all the information we needed. We called the leaders in the community. We said, "We're getting ready to raid that house. And we're going to get the bad guys." Well, golly, the word permeated throughout the community. The police were about to kill the chief because they said, "You're going to get us all killed if we go in there." He said, "We're not going in with, SWAT gear on. We're just going to drive in with regular cars, and we're going to just get out, and we're going to knock on the door and go get them." Well, nobody thought that would work. As a new mayor, I was petrified, okay? But as we walked on those doors, this lady came out in a wheelchair, and she recognized me and recognized the chief. Now, he didn't have his police uniform on, and I had on blue jeans and tennis shoes. And she said, "Mayor, those people over there, they're holding us hostage. We're scared to come out of our houses. We can't come out of our houses." And y'all, when you're, all of a sudden, you have the responsibility and you have an 80-year-old woman in a wheelchair telling you she can't come out of your house, it changes the way you look at everything. And so 2 months later, we went back in. We did the raid. We got the bad guys out. The real bad guys that fled, we knew where they fled. We picked them up. But I went and knocked on that lady's door again and said, "I told you we'd come back." She had died the week before, okay? And so I share that story to give you a perspective of the difference that when you're in the political world, if you're the mayor, I mean, you have such control and impact on the lives of everybody. And some people, maybe they accept the responsibility differently, but that is a huge responsibility. So you wake up every night thinking, how am I going to do better? And you know pretty quickly, you know that you can't do it, and you better be on your knees, you know, and you better have a great team around you. But there's such a transition from being in the business world to that political world if you're going to be successful.
So, Billy, to that point, what are some of the ways that you've seen your dad evolve since you were a young person at UMS versus now? And, I mean, do you attribute some of that to either his life experience or just the natural aging, which aging is undefeated? We also talked about that, you know, this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest evolution or you know change is probably his faith. And growing up, I mean, we went to church, and you know, I would say we were raised in a very Christian home. But I was probably about 10 years old, and there was a story, and please don't go into it. But where something happened, and I think my dad's kind of faith really kind of went to a different level, and again, I've been gone for 25 years, and so I'm observing a lot of this from afar, but it has really been the North Star, the guiding light for everything he has done, and so I would say that for me, that's the biggest, you know, change that is impacted on.
So talking about your decision to leave, I mean, obviously you had ample opportunities down here, whether it was the family business or just because of your own, you know, qualifications. You could have done anything, you know, you wanted to. And this is a two-part question. So for you, do you believe it was a conscious decision of, man, my dad, my family name cast a big shadow down here. I want to go out and do something completely different and prove it to myself, prove it to others, you know, or was there another, you know, driving factor?
Yeah, I don't know if it was wanting to prove it, to totally do it on my own, but I was curious, and I wanted to go experience something different. Life was amazing growing up in Mobile, and I loved going to the hunting camp, going to the beach, had great friends, but I wanted to experience something more, and I think I wanted to challenge myself. And it's maybe easier to say that in hindsight, but even going to Vanderbilt was different than going to, you know, the University of Alabama. I wanted to meet other people. I wanted to get exposure to just, you know, a different environment. And again, it was a scary decision, but I have been fortunate to not only go do something on my own, but now, you know, be able to work with our family, kind of on the investing side. And so I've been able to tie it back to the family business without ever working at the sawmill.
You ever think about what your life would have looked like professionally had you come back here?
I have thought about it, and I'm really not sure what I would be doing at all.
Okay. What about raising your kids in a Northeast, you know, very affluent community culturally compared to here? And is there anything that, you know, you really wish your kids were getting the benefit of experiencing, you know, compared to the way you and I grew up, you know, down here in the South?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I really miss is you referenced, we have a pretty large family, and our family's been fortunate to be very close-knit. We spend a lot of time together up the country, and, you know, I think there'll be 175 Stimpsons together at the 4th of July this year. And so for my children, their cousins, you know, being with the cousins, being with the family, and learning the values that I was raised with is the biggest thing that I miss, you know, being up there. The competition in the Northeast, the helicopter parents, the pressure to succeed at absolutely everything to the nth degree is different up there than down here, and it's not for the better. I hope for you guys that it does not trickle down here. But the pressure on the children up there is insane, and that's a big difference that I miss.
So this is a question for both of you. You know, being a generational type family that's been successful, and you're both business guys. You know, you're in the risk business. You know, Billy, how have y'all viewed it differently and treated it as you approach, you know, the responsibility you have to family wealth? You know, whether that's inherited, whether that's earned, that's all part of a bigger pie, versus personal assets that you may or may feel like you're entitled to take a little bit more risk with. And I'll frame it from the perspective, if I do a deal by myself and I lose everything, it doesn't bother me a bit. You know, if I take your money and the deal doesn't go well, you know, it eats me alive. But, you know, y'all are both in a position to where you've been entrusted by family members, you know, to go manage assets, to go invest prudently for the future. So how have you tried to take that responsibility, be the right steward for that, for lack of a better description, but also continue to try to move the ball down the field and think differently and take different viewpoints and try to go do something special as well? And how do you separate that, you know?
So, Nathan, we're very, as I said, very fortunate. My grandfather, that's really where it started for our family, had a daughter and 3 sons. And throughout their life, they worked together. They were not only business partners, they were best friends. They did not always agree on everything, but they never disagreed in public or behind closed doors on anything. And so they set a tone for what can happen when there's unity. And I'll just extrapolate from that just for a minute. When thinking about the city of Mobile, talking about the vision of creating one Mobile, that was about uniting this city to become a safer, more business and family-friendly city. And so that unity, you know, from biblically, you know, that God commands a blessing. And so for some reason in my generation, there were 14 in my generation. And as Billy said, now when we get together, we'll get together this 4th of July, and there'll be 178 of us, okay? Like rabbits, okay? But what I think, I don't know how it happens, but I think we all feel this sense of obligation is that we're only stewards of what was given to us. We didn't do anything to create what was handed down to us, but we have a responsibility to try to pass that on. And so what you've really got to do is you got to figure out how to grow the pie. The mindset of most people is they want to figure out how to get their slice of the pie and take it. Well, no matter what you think about what we may have, I can just tell you when you divide it 178 ways, there's not much pie left.
It could be 179.
You know, it probably is, okay, while we're talking. And so I think we realize that we can't always have it our way. You know, that we've got to listen, and I think listening and communications, when you have a family as big as ours is, there's a lot of forgiveness in it.
Well, kind of like the Proverbs of the talents, you know, you got to go do something with it.
Absolutely.
You can't bury it in the yard.
You've got to grow the pie, not just the rabbits. You got to, whatever the assets are, you got to grow them.
Well, what about, you know, for you, Billy, being the younger one of the next generation that now is taking the reins on so many fronts in that regard, and you're having to answer up, how has that impacted your decision making and thinking through things in different buckets?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, the communication that he described is something that my generation has continued to develop, and it is absolutely critical. And about 5 or 10 years ago, maybe their generation kind of passed down some responsibilities, you know, to our generation, and we are not all working together. We're not all in the same town, and so we have to, you know, make an extra effort to make decisions about where we want to be investing, who we're investing with, why we want to be investing. And you do have to take, you know, some calculated risk. We are fortunate that we can invest in real estate, we can invest in stocks, bonds, whatever. But we also have to have consensus within the family, and not everybody, you know, is in the investing world. And so part of the communication which builds the relationships is talking to your cousins, talking to your siblings about what do we want to be doing and why we're doing it, and then what is that impact going to be on the family in the future. And so for me personally, I feel a responsibility, but it's also a blessing to kind of be in a leadership position with my cousins, with my siblings, for the family, in making those decisions.
So, Nathan, I think one of the things that we've done is there are other families that are, the fifth generation are operating family businesses. One of those is the Tabasco family, the McElhaney's. Well, a couple of us went to visit them in New Orleans several years ago to find out how they had done this through multiple generations. And they said, in family businesses where you have common ownership and properties or whatever, the oldest generation needs to do every single thing they can and make all the decisions that can possibly be made while they are alive, because when you get to the next generation, there are going to be more of them and the decisions get more difficult. And so whether you're forming up a voting trust or you decide who's in charge, so hugely important to figure out as you pass that baton, how does the voting go? And so it doesn't just happen, because that's why usually after 2 or 3 generations, things break up and people split stuff up. And so that's watching what others do there has been very helpful to us.
So going a little bit further on risk, are there any specific examples for either of you on where you just really missed the mark on mispricing risk on a business deal or a political strategy that you took a swing for it and, man, it was not worth it, or you just completely overlooked something or let your own viewpoints blind you to the point of ignoring the facts? Anything specific come to mind?
Yes, so we were going to do a renovation project at the sawmill, and it was going to be a pretty big project for the size of the company. And we had hired people in Washington State where there are a lot of sawmills to do dimensional analysis of it. We had hired several people to check people, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I was in charge of it. And so I was explaining it to one of the bankers, and the banker was actually about my age or maybe a little younger. And he said, "Sandy, what happens if it doesn't work?" And yep. And I looked at him, and I was thinking, what do you mean if it doesn't work? I mean, really, and I was being arrogant about it. And I was trying not to show that, but that's what I was thinking inside was, there's no way it's not going to work. Well, God wanted to teach me a lesson. So lo and behold, it did not work. Mm-hmm. And it didn't only not work, it really didn't work, okay? And so we were hardly producing any lumber, and my father and 2 uncles, if I'd been hired instead of family, they'd have fired me. And so we had to do some management changes, and I wasn't making as many decisions as I had been, and we figured a way out of it. But that was one of those very humbling experiences, the realizing that that you're not the smartest guy around, and that things do go wrong. But as the conversations that we've heard previous today, you've got to figure out a way to keep on persevering. You can't quit. You've got to push through, because there's so many things involved with it.
I mean, I think back to being in business with you.
Damn it.
So we raised the fund in 2012 with Nathan to go buy a bunch of real estate along the Gulf Coast, and we ended up being partners in Truland Homes and several of other Nathan's businesses, which all ultimately did work out. But
Eventually.
But I think back to Will's chart with the ups and downs and the number of times that Ralph and Nathan and I thought we had the best plan. We thought we had a piece of property that we were going to sell, or we were going to go build a condominium, or we were going to go develop something, and then whatever happened, and you are humbled just like that. And I'll give Nathan really all the credit, his perseverance of just saying, I will figure out a way to get this done. And we would go back to our investors and say, we know we told you this was the plan. That plan's not working. Now we have to pivot, and here's a new plan. And sometimes we got to plan C or D, but you persevering is really what pushed it through.
Yeah, and I go back to that experience, and Thomas Gross, who many of you know, was our CFO at the time, and Ralph always made Thomas run a nuclear winter scenario. And nuclear winter was like everything went wrong, what's left. And I didn't have any money at the time, and still, don't if you count debt. But, my nuclear winter had about this much room for error. You know, obviously Ralph had a different one, but you look back on your career, like how many times that you should not have made it to the other day. And Peter and I are going to talk about this extensively, you know, in his interview later, but, you know, always at the right time, the right person showed up to bail you out, or God put the right person in your life, or, you know, COVID, which you thought was going to be the end all be all, ended up being the best thing that could have happened for my industry for a period of time. But I look back on those experiences with Ralph and Billy, and when things never went as planned, not one time did anybody ever point the finger. You know, everybody had each other's back. Everybody did their part. And I learned that from Ralph, too. Like, have enough respect for your partnerships to treat the operating agreement on the front end with the utmost professionalism. And then if you're in business with the right people, it never gets pulled out no matter what. But have the respect for each other to do it right on the front end. I heard you talking about that. And as somebody who's learned that the hard way over the last few years, if you write one thing down today, it's that. Yeah, it means that much. So diving in a little bit deeper, because I know you two know everybody. I mean, you know the most interesting people in the world. You know, you've been all these fantastic places. Like, share just some other stories for us, and you can get as in-depth as you want, where you were somewhere, where you were in a room with somebody, and you heard something that just hit you over the head and was like, man, that just imprinted in my mind, and that's not going anywhere. And it doesn't have to be somebody you've had a lifelong relationship with, but just somewhere that you didn't think you were going to be, you know, with somebody you didn't think you'd ever interact with, and it's like, oh, wow, you know, I get it.
So there are hundreds of them.
I know there's hundreds.
And I don't know why this one comes to mind, but Billy's commenting about faith, and it's at a point in my life I realized someone was challenged. Somebody said, you need to wake up every morning and give God the first 7 minutes, either reading scripture, praying, before you get going. And if you do that for a month, I guarantee you will give me more time every morning, which is absolutely true. And you become the mayor, your prayer life really ramps up. But so, you know, my father and two uncles were, even though they were my role models, you know, they were not, I'd say, men of strong faith. I mean, they all attended church. But so we're at the hunting camp one night, and in their room, there's like 6 double beds, and so I was allowed to sleep in the room one night with them, and so they had a friend named John Barton, you know, from Baton Rouge, and Mr. Barton had put on his pajamas. He actually wore pajamas, and when he got ready to get in the bed, he knelt down right beside that bed, and we were all in the process of getting in bed, and I thought, wow. Right here in the hunting camp in front of these friends, he's going to get on his knees and pray. And I get on my knees. I mean, I was a child. I mean, I think most people in here probably did get on their knees and pray, but at some point you probably quit. Well, since that point in time, I don't know that I've missed a night, no matter who's in the room. Of course, there's typically anybody in the room but my wife, but you know,
I wasn't going to ask.
But if you go to the hunting camp, you can be with some other guys, and then they look at you. Okay.
How about you, Billy? I mean, Wall Street interactions, billionaires. I mean, anything that was just an aha moment in person?
My roommate, when I was living in New York, one of my roommates from Mobile, Will Sledge, was dating George Bush's daughter at a moment in time, and we got to spend a little bit of time at the White House. And we're standing there, and all of a sudden, a hand hits me on the back of the shoulders, and he says, "So y'all are the boys from Mobile?" And we said, "Yes, sir." And so, meeting the president in the White House is incredibly, humbling and unique. But being able to spend some time with him and just see the person that he was, you know, as a normal person, and he pulled us aside. And he said, "You know, y'all are in New York. You're having fun." He said, "Don't ever forget where you came from." He said, "You think you're up there on Wall Street. Don't forget your roots. Don't forget who you are." And I thought that was very meaningful and surprising that he even knew who we were.
Yeah, I got to meet President Bush twice. Once when I was in the Marine Corps, got to greet him when he came to Alabama, and it was incredible. I mean, it was like you drank beer with the man the night before,
100%.
just who he was. And then heard him at a small panel, one time at University of Texas, and just incredible. Yeah, I know he's one of Brad's favorite leaders to always reference as well, but just his humility. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to move, a little bit quicker here, but both of you have extremely, high standards, and you also have values that you're never going to compromise. Is there a time, because I know there's not one where you have, but is there a time where you found yourself having to slap yourself in the face or get a reality check because all of a sudden you allowed value creep and you're like, man, I almost just compromised everything that I stand for and almost let something else take priority? Or has it been you just know who you are, you know what your name is, and never in a million years is that ever going to happen? And that's a fine answer.
No, I would say that, the temptation is always there. In finance in New York, the competition to make the extra dollar, to be the best, to, change the rules, to, look for inside information or some unfair advantage is incredibly prevalent. And I will give, Ralph all the credit here. I mean, from my first day at Deutsche Bank through, the last 17 years at Bienville, there's just no chance that we are going to cross the line. But that doesn't mean sometimes you're not tempted to look over the ledge and say, well, what if we just did it this way or just for a second? Mm-hmm. And without the right partners around you, without the right foundation, and for us, I think it's, faith-based, it is so easy to cross that line. Yeah,
and that's why it's so vital to have values, because when you know who you are, the decision's already been made. It's easier to avoid something 100% of the time than 90% of the time. That's just the reality. But part two of that, both of y'all have extremely, high standards. So how are you able, and I hate to say cope with, but inside of your organization, and especially in government, not everybody is an A performer. And maybe in Wall Street, the culture is if you're not an A performer, you're going to be moved out so fast anyway, it takes care of itself. But how are you able to lead with empathy and grace and develop people to where they can be a value add to everybody around them?
So several years ago, Airbus had the first board meeting outside of Europe, had it in Mobile at the Bragg Mitchell home, and one of the board members came up to me, and he was from England, I think, and he said, Sandy, he said, something I tell all young people is, 5 years from today, you will be the same person as you are today, but for the books you read and the people you meet. If everybody that's been talking today, almost everybody has referred to some book. First speaker was today's first speaker. Today's first speaker.
Who was it? Mark.
Mark.
Oh,
Excuse
sorry.
me, Mark. Anyway.
Don't ask me tough questions.
That's been 73 years old.
Get my program out.
But what Mark has done, Mark has synthesized what he's learned from reading a bunch of books. At least that's my assessment of it. And so, my encouragement is recognize that I don't want to be the same person as I am today. Okay, I want to be, if I can be better, I want to be better. The temptation to in government is just unbelievable. Not that it's not that elsewhere, but there was a book I read one time, and it says that there's a trap out there for everybody, and this is talking about men specifically. And that trap is typically money, another woman, or neglected family. And so the temptation is there. I don't care how old you are or what walk of life you're in, and it's good to have some really close friends that you can confide in to help you make sure that you're going to stay on that narrow path. And that's my suggestion is that whether it's something that you can be reading, because you can play all kind of mental games and justify all kinds of things, but you can't just say, I'm just not going to do that, because you never know when that doesn't work.
And we got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to move fast. But we talk about habits, and you talked about your ritual with prayer in the morning. Billy's is vivacious a reader as I know, and pushed me very early in my career to invest a lot of time in it. As two people are extremely busy for the crowd, how have y'all prioritized reading and made that possible? I mean, because y'all are as busy as anyone I know, and it's easy to say, I wish I had time to read a book.
I mean, I think you just have to prioritize it. I mean, you make time for what's important. I have the benefit of a hour-long train ride to and from work every day, and so I do find some time then, but it's really just, setting it as a priority.
All right, so these are going to be some of my fun ones to kind of wrap up with, but yeah, it's two people who have achieved success, every step of the way. Like, how have you been able to continue to find challenge, purpose, fulfillment? Has it been, having to reinvent yourself with the next career? Is it having to be setting bigger goals? And I'm asking for a friend. I'm asking for myself here. What is it that keeps you going, that keeps you smiling, that keeps your heart, full?
Well, I think part of it is knowing that if you can make a difference, you need to be trying to do something. But Nathan, you're not there yet, but you maybe get there. But the ultimate success is one day hearing God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Mm-hmm. And so if you're a steward of the gifts and resources that have been given to you, what are you doing to hopefully, hear those words? And so I think that we're here to try to make the world a better place to live. And so I wake up in the morning, and I may not have this long list of things I think that I'm going to do to make the world a better place, but the next thing I know, I get a phone call and say, "Well, you do this." Mm-hmm. And then, you realize that I have some talents or skill sets or whatever that can help there. And so I guess it's that internal engine that just drives all of us, and I can't tell you maybe what fires me and what fires you could be different.
Well, I'll sidebar. As somebody who has a heart like you do and is capable of solving almost everybody's problems, what filter system do you use?
Well, I can't solve everybody's problem.
Oh, come on.
I can't solve some of mine.
Come
That's the first thing. There's some I may pass on to you to see if you can help me solve them.
I was getting bored, so that'd be great.
So Nathan, I love that. What filter do I pass it through? And sometimes you just realize that you're not the right person to possibly do that.
Gotcha.
And you just say, I'm not the guy, but I do know somebody that you could go to help you there.
How about you, Billy?
I was going to say, well, one thing you and I've talked a lot about is learning to say no.
No.
And that's I've had to learn that. I know you have as well.
Yeah, the question, just after accomplishing various things in your career, how do you keep finding the same drive and excitement?
As kind of Brad and Will were alluding to in their talks, I mean, my life's trajectory is as jagged as most people's, and we've been knocked down, kicked in the teeth over and over and over, and also been on those peaks where you start to think you're pretty good, you're special, you've done something, and for whatever reason, we continue to be humbled. But for me, I love what I do. The first 10 years of my career, I did not like my job. I figured out how to be successful at it, but it was not something that I was passionate about. For the last 17 years, I get to do something that I truly think I was meant here to do. And so that drives me a lot, and I'm also pretty competitive, and so you want to keep trying to get those wins.
All right, I got 3 questions for each of you in 3 minutes, all right? So your life is a movie. You get to the end of it, you're watching it all, from beginning to end. What didn't matter as much as you thought it was going to, and what mattered way more than you ever thought it would?
How much time we got?
I came up with this one this morning.
Yeah. Well, relationships, they matter so much more than I think when you're younger, you just don't realize it. But the older I get, the more I recognize how important it is and how much more important it is to listen. I mean, you can't lead if you can't listen.
So what didn't matter as much as you thought it would?
So
Mr.
I'll
Sandy?
answer that
All
one.
right.
So, and I might offend a lot of y'all that are athletes. The sport, the importance that I put on sports growing up, and now that watching my children, the actual accomplishments get celebrated. You were talking about, seeing your name in the paper. I was the same way. That didn't matter. But the camaraderie, being part of a team, putting in the effort, having setbacks and moving forward, that does. But I put way too much pressure on success, and that
Yeah,
didn't matter.
I'll 100% agree with that.
Having a great wife is maybe much more important than maybe what I thought of at one point in my life.
Having mentors or friends that you can have real and honest conversations with. I mean, I know we're both in YPO, but having a group of people that you can truly tell them, the 5% of things that are going on in your life that you're not comfortable telling most people about, to keep you in line, to be a sounding board is very valuable.
All right. Where are we in 2050? Mr. Sandy, I'm going to ask you about Mobile, and Billy, I'm going to ask for a macro view.
2050?
2050, what does the world look like?
Gosh, I'll be so old, Nathan, I'm not sure I can think that far. But anyway, I think Mobile is, Bradley Burns says we're in a golden era right now. What's going to happen in Mobile over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I don't think that anybody can really predict what it's going to be. But a lot of it's going to depend on who's in government. And I can't overstress the importance of voting and being engaged, because if you look around at cities that should be doing well and they're not, it's 100% because of the leadership. And so I think the future is very bright for Mobile.
How about Billy? What's the world look like?
You'll be building houses on Mars.
Yeah.
In all seriousness. No, I mean, I think that we're in a really interesting period with, the changes in technology and how that's going to impact cities and communities and towns. And I'm looking forward to probably being back down south by 2050.
I will welcome you with open arms, brother.
Thank you, buddy.
All right.
Can I say one thing?
You can say whatever you want. It's your city. I'm just paying rent.
You've made my family seem bigger than what we think of ourselves as. I mean, we've been very fortunate, but we're just really ordinary people that have had opportunities and God's grace to get us to where we are. And so I hope the audience doesn't leave here thinking that we all were born with a silver spoon in our mouth and things just happened. Because, I mean, when you work in the sawmill, I mean, you wear, boots and khaki pants and hard hats. And so I never wore a suit until I became the mayor, except for when I had to go to a funeral, church, or go see the bankers, So
Well, your family
name,
family name has been used a lot in my house. And
Well, that's
I've gotten to
fine.
sit in many meetings with both of you, and I know who you are, and that's where the aura comes from.
Yeah.
But last question, and we're done. So, all right, I always ask this one. But you're on your deathbed. You get to leave your kids one piece of advice. What is it?
Start the morning with the Lord every day. Get on your knees, read the Bible, and start your day that way every day.
So I would agree with that. I think persevere. If I could leave my children anything aside from that, faith, would be just the mindset to persevere, to never give up, because things get hard. We all deal with it. And if you just don't give up, you can be successful.
Well, this has been wonderful. I could sit here for a month and talk to these two guys, but Mr. Stimpson and I have shared a discussion over this, and I credit the quote to Obama. I don't know if it's true, but we are who we are either because of or in spite of our fathers. And it's no accident who Billy, who his siblings are, because of their dad. And I look at my own father, who he calls Mr. Sandy his best friend and has for life. I am who I am because of and in spite of, my father. And I feel like as a parent, our two goals are to give our kids more opportunities than we had and to make them better people than we are. And if we can accomplish those two things, any of us, we've done pretty damn good. And my one thing that I would leave my kids, and they get tired of hearing me say it, is you do the right thing for the right reasons. And when you mess up, you do the next right thing. Guilt, shame, regret, all those things will eat us alive. What's done is done. All you can do is the next right thing. And the next right thing is lunch. Y'all have been fantastic. All right, we got an hour break. Eat up, get some caffeine, come back energized. What a wonderful morning. Thank you, guys.